Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of San Diego Family Mediation and our podcast. So today we have Jen Segura,
Hi,
who also has glasses on, and we are going to talk today about spousal support. Jen is a mediator here. She's been experienced. How long have you been mediating?
about 10 years.
Yeah.
now.
So a decade of experience in mediation, bless you. And and so
Sometimes are better than others.
right. So we're gonna be just as a little bit different setup than last time. We're just kind of trying to see what way works a little better. And we're just gonna be kind of sitting here drinking. I have tea. She has some coffee.
Coffee.
And we're gonna just start talking about spousal support, as one would do on a Monday. So first, let's start out with, let's start very basic. Jen, what is spousal support in a nutshell?
Oh.
And
phones.
We have Glenn.
All right. So spousal support, it has been created just to basically help get the supported party back into the workforce and back to being self-supporting. It's not created to getting married is not a financial plan. You don't go out and get married for 10 years.
For most people, yeah.
Yeah. So that the rest of your life you're supported.
Right.
I mean, and this is very specific to San Diego.
Right.
And San Diego the judges are not so excited about spousal support. But it is necessary in a lot of cases when you have, a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad that's been out of the workforce for 10, 15, 20 years.
So it's kind of like a means to an end. So, how I always looked at it and explained it to clients was, this is a temporary measure to try and support you to get you back on your feet and transition to a new life outside the marriage. So, and I think that's kind of like, there's always that animosity. It's one of I would say the most high conflict areas.
It is also because it's so discretionary.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not, and they're talking about doing it, but currently we can't just plug numbers into a system and pop out a number the way most people think that we can. I mean, we can, but that's not how you're supposed to come up with spousal support. You're supposed to follow factors and look at the whole picture.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's kind of like one of those things too, especially when you have a situation where maybe there's some infidelity and, and maybe the person who was cheated on is now forced to pay
That's never fun.
No, the other spouse, monthly amount.
Absolutely.
There's always that animosity there. It's like, why am I having to pay this person who wrecked my marriage?
Absolutely.
But it's not like a reward. It's trying to help them so that they can move on and transition out of the marriage. But I think that that's something that a lot of people get confused about.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, if we kind of make it heavier set in the beginning so that they can go out and get the training, so that they can go out and get the job, then it's going to be a much shorter time period. But, if we're fighting to make sure it's as small as possible in the beginning and they're just barely making ends meet, then how are they going to go out and go to school and create, a better life for themselves? We have to give them the tools to get back out there. And those tools will vary based on, have you guys been married for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Were both partners working throughout the whole marriage? Was only one partner working? Was one partner helping the other one to and they did things at home so that person could create a better career for their family as a whole? There's a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah. And I think, speaking of duration, I think another kind of big myth out there is, if you hang on for 10 years, you got them. So it's like the marriage of long duration, which typically is over 10 years. Yeah. How has that changed? I guess, are you set for life at 10 years? But that's changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's not so much that way.
Well, and I typically find people that they leave mediation because they think that they're not getting a good deal in mediation for spousal support, that once they do end up in court, they find it's a lot less than they we're being offered in mediation, because in mediation, we're looking at your budget. We're looking at, what do you have to pay every month?
Right.
And the court doesn't look at your budget. The
Right.
court just looks at what's coming in the door. And they don't care if you have a $5,000 a month, rent payment or a $2,000 a month, whatever. But I think that where people go wrong is just expecting that, having that expectation that I'm going to be paid support forever, because it's not really going to happen unless you've been married for 30 years and you literally spent your entire life raising families, and there's no way you could create a career in the time you have left.
Right. I think there was only one specific instance where I saw that spousal support for the rest of their life was actually made sense. And it was, they had been married for 30 plus years. She had never gone to school. At this point, she was in her 50s or 60s. And it's, not to say that that's too old. That's too old to do anything. But really to start from scratch at that age.
Yeah. When you're like looking retirement in the face.
Right.
And,
Right. And at that point, it is, she sacrificed her working years towards the family. So then it made sense in that situation. But I feel like it's one of those, it's a temporary measure.
Absolutely.
And also you don't want, so if you have kids with someone, right.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want your kids when they go over to your spouse's house to be like living in destitute.
I know.
That's too, you pay them child support to help take care of
but that's never enough.
But if they're really that far behind and they don't have anything to really fall back on, you don't want your kids going, I could
the hood.
Right. I could only afford a house in the worst part of City Heights, like you don't want your kid. There's nothing wrong with City Heights, but it's statistically higher crime than other areas.
Well, especially when, if they were living in Rancho Santa Fe before that, like we've got to be consistent with, you hear that marital standard of living, which is another myth,
right?
That spousal support should keep both people at their marital standard of living. It's impossible,
right?
It's not a reality. How do you have the exact same amount of money coming into the family, but now we have two homes,
right?
But you both need to stay at the same standard. Like it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Yeah. And I think that's another, you highlighted another benefit of mediation. We look at the budget. We say, hey, this is realistic and this is not realistic. And we actually take the time to go through, which I've been in court, and we spend maybe 15, 20 minutes going through like the budget form, which is called a FL 150, if you guys are familiar. So they'll go through it. But it's like, I think it's nothing comparatively. It's maybe 20, 30 minutes. I've seen it maybe stretch an hour if there's a specific issue, but usually the judge just wants to move on. Like they don't want to hear it. Whereas here, we'll spend 2, sometimes 3, 4 hours kind of making sure that they're set up.
And I just remembered something.
What?
The new tax proposal on the table. They're proposing to take away the spousal support deduction.
Wow.
Which means that now spousal support will not be tax deductible by the payor and not considered income and taxable to the payee. And so in the past, or right now, we're able to kind of offset. So if the higher earner, is obviously at a much higher tax rate, we're able to offset that by, giving the spousal support, because now the person being supported is paying at a much lower tax rate, which often can create the ability of the payor to pay a little bit more because of the tax,
right?
The tax deduction that they got.
It's a win-win, really.
It is. And now there's a proposal to take it away. And I understand that they're taking away the deduction for children.
Wow, that will change a lot of things.
Absolutely. And I think the deduction for children, I think that's like a done deal. Maybe not. I haven't totally researched into what it is, but that's pretty much what they're doing.
Wow.
So you're not going to have that deduction for children.
Wow.
Because they want to Yeah.
Right. So that's gonna change a lot of things. And I think that even makes it more of a benefit to go to mediation so we can work things in the best
Absolutely.
possible way. A lot of what Jen does too is financial planning post-divorce, and you kind of analyze their finances and say, this is the best way moving forward that you need to do things. So I think that makes it even more important. I mean, it's going to change a lot of things.
I mean, it's really narrowing what we can and can't do, and definitely narrows what the courts can and can't do. And it's just so unfortunate because, again, at least we used to be able to keep more money in the whole family pot, even if, you know, whatever, it's being filtered over here. But I think they said an estimated like 80 million a year, 80 billion a year, some outrageous number is what the IRS loses every year from that deduction. But, you know, I mean, there is a good reason for that because of the fact that, you know, you've got these people supporting two households, and
and I know this is kind of like a more of a legal nerd kind of wondering. I mean, it does promote someone also it kind of gives them the incentive to pay their spousal support. So I wonder if we're going to see a higher cases of contempt. Yeah. I'm just curious if that's going to end up happening.
I think it's going to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how people are going to make up for that savings that they had before.
Right. We'll have to get more creative.
I know. And I mean, we can only do so much.
I know, totally. So, you know, we talked a little bit about the taxes, and that's changing of spousal support. What are some other things that you think maybe clients either don't know or misunderstand about spousal support?
Well, I think a big misunderstanding is the difference between temporary and permanent. So temporary support is like, how much support am I going to get while we're going through this divorce? So, you know, from when we file the petition to when we're actually finalizing the divorce, there's this period of time that things need to kind of stay status quo. You know, we have a house we have to pay for, we have kids that need to go to school, we have this happening. So that is where that calculation comes in, where you use the DissoMaster or whatever family law software to come up with that support number. And that is based on marital standard of living and things like that, because that's what we're trying to do, is kind of just keep everything afloat while we go through this process. But once we start talking about post-judgment support, now we're talking about something entirely different, and it's no longer looking at marital standard of living the way it was, and now it's more looking at need. You know, what is the need and what's the ability to pay? And it's all based on, there's a code basically. And some of those things is, you know, what is the earning capacity of each spouse, and what are the age of the parties? What's the health of the parties? How long was the marriage? The immediate and specific consequences of taxes to each party, which is going to change. I mean, hopefully they'll come up with a new way for us to come up with spousal support if that happens. But I mean, you know, it's taking the big picture, because we can go through all the factors, but at the end, there's also, the judge can just do whatever he wants to do based on whatever he thinks is equitable. So you really, when you walk into a courtroom and you give that decision-making power to the judge, you just have no idea what's going to come back.
Right. It's out of your hands at that point.
It's out of your hands.
And that's like, I think that's one of the most frightening things about our family law system in general is you go into a courtroom, you don't have the right to an attorney.
Yeah.
And they're very expensive. So, you know, a lot of people can't afford attorneys, and you're putting your entire life in the hands of the judge, who's going to decide one way or the other, knowing very like basic stuff about your case. And
if you don't have an attorney, the only stuff that judge is going to know is what you've given to that judge.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know, like, oh, you can add this, or you can add attachment, you know, some people, it's a complicated system. And I think that's why a lot more people are just moving more towards a more intimate mediation setting.
Absolutely. And something that you keep control of.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you don't agree to it, it doesn't happen here.
Absolutely. And, you know, you're spending 8 to 10 hours with your mediator to where you're getting, everybody knows everything pretty detailed. So at least the agreements are being made based on reality and not based on a little chunk of information here and there that kind of was thrown together and given to the judge. And so
and when it comes to spousal support and you're looking at all these different factors, which in the statute, it's 14 different factors that they look at specifically. But, you know, we take into a lot more into account other than just those 14 factors. I mean, that's kind of like a guideline that kind of helps us to get to certain numbers. And we have certain software that we put in numbers, like you were saying, there's DISO Master, there's family law software, and we use those, we use family law software, and we put in all that to give us specific numbers, and we can, if you're looking for a specific number, we can break it down for you. I won't, that's like a whole nother, that could be an hour-long podcast. But you know, there's a lot that you can do in mediation. And I think if you are looking for just to kind of like sit down with someone and talk about like, hey, like what can I expect? What are some things that specific to our situation that I need to watch out for that we can do as far as doing like specific tax, you know, work and things like that, we can do that here. I mean, really, is there anything else you would like to add with regards to spousal support? We've done a pretty good, I mean, this is very, very basic. Shallow. I just wanted to kind of, that's something, a question we get a lot. So I wanted to kind of do a general overview of spousal support. But is there anything else that you were thinking about?
I think it's just important to come into the process knowing, you know, what kind of you'd like to do. Like, what are some options? And that's something we like to talk about in mediation too, is like, all right, well, maybe 15 years ago you were in marketing. Well, maybe you don't like marketing anymore. And my God, marketing's changed a lot from 15 years ago to today. So, you know, maybe it's not even an option for you to go back into it because the amount of time and effort it would take to get caught up is just not possible. So, you know, think about things. Like, don't come into a process expecting I'm just going to be taken care of and receive support for the rest of my life. Like, have a conversation with yourself about what are my, you know, what do I like now? What do I want to do? Where, you know, is there schooling I want to go to? Do I want to be a nurse? Like, what could I do to be a nurse? Do you have any degrees? Do you want a degree? Like, we've got to, we're going to talk about those things. So it's beneficial if you come in with that mindset and kind of like, what can we do to get me there rather than coming in with the mindset, I'm never working again in my life, and you're going to pay for it. Regardless to why you're in the situation you're in, it doesn't matter. The court doesn't care. Your husband could have had 15 affairs and with all of your sisters, and they don't care.
It's a lot of sisters.
It is a lot of sisters.
But I think too, you bring up a good point about not having a conversation, and I think having a conversation even before you get married. You know, we do prenups here as well, and that's something that we talk about. You know, what are some things that we're just so busy.
They won't stop.
You know, having a conversation about what are the expectations in marriage? You know, like, do you want to work? Are you going to work through the marriage? If you have kids, how are you going to take off some years or a year?
Are you guys going to put them in daycare? Like, and that's a huge thing too. Even if you don't want a premarital agreement done, because some people just don't want that done. Coming in, we do financial planning for, you know, a couple getting married, and it's nothing that's super intricate or anything like that, but it's more of, you know, what are your spending habits? What are my spending habits? How much debt do you have? Have you guys seen each other's credit reports?
It's amazing how many people get married. They're like, I have no idea that I got married and I didn't know he was $30,000 in credit card debt. Like,
I mean, you've got to know these things going in. You can't just jump into something that, you know, seems like it's an easy thing to do. And people always say it's so easy to get married, it's so hard to get divorced. Well, before you get married, you're adult. You're supposed to take it upon yourself to learn more about what you're jumping into. Otherwise, it is going to be complex in the end. You know?
So I think that kind of does it for spousal support. I think we could keep going. We could talk all day about this stuff.
Absolutely.
But if you have any questions about spousal support, you can comment on the video, or you could give us a call. I'll put the number also in the video, and visit our website. We have a lot of great information on there.
Or drop-in clinics on Tuesdays.
Yes, drop-in clinics from 11:30 to 1 p.m. come in and you can find out more information and meet us. You can compliment our awesome glasses, whatever you'd prefer to do. But yeah, so, just give us a call if you have any other questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye.